Sometimes, the greatest test of faith is not in the storms we see, but in the silence we don't understand. What if God's silence was never his absence, but his plan unfolding in ways we cannot yet see? There once was a mighty king, feared and respected across many lands. He had everything: wealth, power, and armies at his command. But despite all he possessed, he was troubled by one thing. His most loyal servant, a simple slave named Elias, never questioned life, no matter how hard it became. Elias had a strange habit. No matter what happened, good or bad, he would always say, "God is good, and his plans are perfect." The king often laughed at his words, dismissing them as foolishness. One day, the king and Elias went hunting in the deep forests. As they tracked a deer, the king's bowstring snapped, and in the chaos, his own arrow struck his hand, severing his thumb. Blood poured from his wound, and he roared in anger. Elias quickly tore a piece of cloth to bandage the wound, but as he did, he softly whispered, "God is good, and his plans are perfect." The king's eyes burned with rage. "How dare you say that when I am in pain? How can losing my thumb be part of any good plan?" Elias bowed his head. "I do not know, my king, but I trust that one day you will see." The king, furious at the response, ordered his guards to seize Elias and throw him into the dungeon. "Let him see if his faith will save him now," the king muttered as he stormed back to his palace. Days later, after his hand had healed, the king went hunting again, this time without Elias. But as he ventured deep into the forest, he was ambushed by a fierce tribe of cannibals. They dragged him to their village, bound him, and prepared him for sacrifice. As the firewood was stacked, the tribe's chief stepped forward to inspect the king. Just before the ritual began, the chief suddenly stopped. He pointed at the king's injured hand. "He is imperfect. He is missing a thumb. He cannot be offered to our gods." The villagers immediately untied him and cast him out of their land. Weak and shaken, the king stumbled back to his palace, realizing the terrible fate he had just escaped. As soon as he returned, he ordered Elias to be freed from the dungeon. The king fell to his knees before his humble servant. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I see it now. Losing my thumb saved my life. God truly is good." Elias smiled and bowed. "I knew you would understand, my king." But then the king's face darkened. "Yet I did something terrible to you, Elias. I threw you into the dungeon for speaking the truth. I kept you in chains for days. How can that be part of God's plan?" Elias chuckled softly. "Oh, my king, if I had not been in the dungeon, I would have gone hunting with you that day. And unlike you, I have all my fingers. The cannibals would have surely sacrificed me instead." The king was speechless. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at Elias, who still carried no bitterness, only unwavering faith. At that moment, the king realized that God's silence had never been his absence. His plans were always at work, even when they didn't make sense. Sometimes we question why God allows pain, loss, or delays. We wonder why he is silent when we need answers the most. But like the king, we don't always see the full picture. What seems like suffering today may be the very thing that saves us tomorrow. No matter what happens, hold on to faith, because even in silence, God is good and his plans are perfect.